Hello, everybody. The time is 2 o'clock and the inquiry is resumed. Yes, Mr. Simons, if I just turn to you first.
Thank you very much, sir. So we've had an eventful 45 minutes, and the first thing that we did was to approach Mr. John Snedden. John, John, Snedden, Sneddon. John Snedden is the managing director at Tetlow King, which is obviously Mr. Warner's firm and is his boss, if you like. And Mr. Snedden, quite remarkably, really, to his credit, has said that he can move things around to be available for the next 2 weeks to step into Mr. Warner's shoes, essentially, and to speak to his proof of evidence and to give evidence give his own evidence, but to speak to Mr. Warner's proof of evidence next week. Now, the first, and in those circumstances, subject to something about what we do for the rest of the day and tomorrow morning, which I'll come to in a minute, but just as a matter of high-level principle, first of all, I'd wanted to raise that, suggest it to you and obviously to the other parties, and if that were acceptable to you, Counsel, Dr. Keith, except well, you most of all, sir, obviously, then that would obviate the need to go off looking for dates in June or July. That's the first thing. So I'll raise that, and then I'll come. If that were acceptable, you can comment on that, sir. Then I've got a request that flows from it, and the request is that we adjourn for the rest of the day. And the reason for that is that I'm about to start cross-examining Ms. James, and Mr. Snedden is aware of this case, but he's not yet read into the detail of it, and he's got quite a lot to do in the next sort of 12 hours or so. What I would ask you, sir, and see if the counsel were amenable, particularly given what I said about not being as long as I'd said, indicated with Dr. Keith in cross-examination. So I think we will have a bit of flex this week in the programme, would be to resume tomorrow at, say, something like 10 or even 10:30. I know that's not, we're hoping to start earlier than that, I'd anticipate, to give us both, to give him the afternoon and me the afternoon to talk to him and all of the rest of it. And then also I'd want to meet him tomorrow morning as well. We're going to need that little bit of extra time so that when I start off cross-examining Mrs. James from there on, he's at least got to grips with all of the proofs of evidence and the documents which are before you. So that's all I wanted to say at this stage, sir.
Okay. Two things that spring immediately to mind. First of all, are you really comfortable with that? Because although he's obviously very senior and therefore I'm sure very capable, if he doesn't understand this scheme, we are talking about extremely tight turnarounds in terms of his own sort of knowledge gathering. Yep. Secondly, and this is probably a question for the counsel, and I will turn to them now, and Dr. Keith, do you have any concerns about how or any aspect of that? One thing that springs to mind is it is possible that a new person will bring a different angle onto this, and therefore that the council might not be quite as prepared as they might have been because it won't be the same person who's wrote the proof.
I would assume, though, they can't add new evidence, can they?
No.
That's right. The function of what he'd be doing, you to answer Dr. Keith's point, he'd be speaking to, he wouldn't be preparing a new written document. No, he'd be speaking to what's there. But you're right, sir, though, in the end, he'd have to give his own professional view. Because he doesn't, I don't know yet, because I've not had a con with him, obviously. I don't know whether and to what extent his view matches or departs in any material respects from Mr. Warner. I just don't know. On his sort of degree of preparedness, which was your first question, sir, the extent to which do I feel comfortable him stepping in? The answer normally would be no. I think that'll be fair to say. However, Mr. Snedden has a plan in this sector, and he's responsible for a couple of the appeals that are in the core documents before you in other parts of the country on extra care. So unlike most planners, he's actually got experience of doing inquiries and hearings promoting exactly this sort of scheme, and indeed dealing with greenbelt issues too, in respect of the balance between need for extra care on the one hand and greenbelt issues on the other. So it's not It's not ideal, to put it. Yeah, of course, it's not even coming close to ideal. I think the only realistic alternative would be a delay until, from our side, taking account of what you and Dr. Keith said. I've not heard from Mr. Smythe yet. It would probably be, we'd be looking at the sort of first 2 weeks of June, something like that, in order to resume an adjourned inquiry, and that too has with it considerable disbenefits. So on balance, our preference as the appellant, on balance, would be to, if at all possible, to press ahead, notwithstanding the admitted, challenges of changing planning witness at this stage. But I'll stop.
Okay, I'll turn to Mr. Smythe now for your thoughts.
Yes, sir. In short, the council is content with that course. You're right to draw attention to the fact there is a potential difficulty because Mr. Snedden may have a different angle. It won't be a new evidence, but he may have a different angle. But I'm conscious of the fact that my learned friend is under some difficulty, so it's suboptimal for everyone. And I recognise there may be a slight difficulty for me, but then there's an attendant difficulty for my learned friend. And I think the overarching incentive to try and keep the show on the road, if we can, I think probably overrides the other matters. So the short answer, sir, is that if you're happy, we are happy.
Okay, I think I am happy, given that the main parties all seem to be happy. And I do agree that there has to be an adjournment this afternoon, clearly. Yeah. That nothing else makes sense. And we do have a bit of float in the programme based on these shorter cross-examination periods we're now expecting. So we could delay things perhaps slightly tomorrow as well.
If that were acceptable, sir, a slightly later start tomorrow would be really, would be really welcome for the appellant's team, because we'll have some meetings, obviously.
So if we say, you suggested 10:30.
If that were acceptable, sir.
Let me just look at the program I've got in front of me. So if we shifted that forward, so I'm slightly thinking out loud here.
Of course, sir. Of course.
I have it that we now have essentially 2 sessions of float in my program. So I'd be happy to essentially just not have the morning session tomorrow and start at 11. If that gives you just that bit more time.
That would be great, sir. Yeah, that would be really great. Thank you very much. And then from there on, we will hope to be in a position where we can just press on for the rest of the inquiry.
Okay. So sort of just to confirm me that with Dr. Keith and Mr. Smythe, that does seem like the most sensible course of action. The least worse, I think, is probably the best way of putting it.
I agree. I think an adjournment to June has lots of other consequences.
Yes, thank you. Okay, and so Mrs. James, we'd come back with you cross-examination in the morning.
Just one question.
Yeah.
In relation to the presentation by our district councillor, she was going to do it first thing tomorrow morning. So when should we ask her to come in to make her presentation?
Yes, thank you. Could we ask? I think we probably should still start with her, just to stop disrupting the flow if possible. But it would have to be when we're all here, so it would have to be at 11. Now, I don't know if that's going to work with her diary. Perhaps can I ask that someone takes that away and finds out over the afternoon and emails planning inspectorate. And if for some reason she can't make that, then we'll make sure that she's heard from at some point during the inquiry.
So is that something you want the parish council to pursue, or will one of will East Cam speak to her?
I think it's really the parish council's responsibility.
Okay, we'll speak to Charlotte and ask her to be available for 11 o'clock. If there are any problems, we'll come back to you.
Exactly. As I say, if she really can't make that, then that's fine. We've got the other 6 days, and we will make sure that we hear from her.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And just ask if you perhaps give some thoughts as to if this does have any other implications in how you want to order the evidence or anything overnight in your cons, and we can talk about it tomorrow when we resume.
Thank you, sir. Certainly, for our part, my hope would be, assuming that Mr. Snedden's able to sort of at least read into the extent that then he can follow along properly for the rest of the week, including Miss James's cross-examination. And that, if that were right, and he's obviously got a lot of reading ahead, but if that were right, then he'll then, in addition to that, have the weekend in order to get himself up to speed to be, and Monday, I suppose, as well, to get himself up to speed to be cross-examined by Mr. Smythe and indeed by Dr. Keith. And the basis of that cross-examination, as Dr. Keith may explain, just to be absolutely clear, the basis on which you can cross-examine him, Dr. Keith, would be Mr. Warner's proof of evidence. So you can ask him questions about that as if he'd written it, sort of thing. That would have to be the sort of premise of it all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for being
unless anyone else has anything else like to raise, then we can adjourn and resume at 11 tomorrow.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The inquiry is adjourned. Thank you.